Hi there, Carolyn Peeler with you today in Ellen Hutson's classroom. And today I have a watercolor card to share with you that features Prima Watercolors, the Cosmo Cricut Work in Progress art deck, and then a lovely Clearly Besotted stamp. So let's get started. To begin, we're going to mix water with the pigments from the Prima Marketing watercolor set. And I am using the set called the Classics. Here I'm mixing water with both the red and the fuchsia pigment. I'm using my Ranger craft sheet as my palette to mix my colors together. And then I'm going to start to apply the color directly to this Cosmo Cricut cutout. Now this is really beautiful. It's printed on watercolor paper, so it's designed to accept watercolors to it. And the cool thing about these Cosmo Cricut art decks is that they have resist things printed on them. So in this case, it's the word Wildflower. In other products, it could be an art design. So sometimes there's arrows or other little fun things that are printed with this resist. So as you watercolor, the design is going to come out, which is a really cool thing. There's also gold foil on this. So the words perhaps she is a, those are done with gold foil. So it's a really beautiful product. As you can see, I am applying my color. So I started off with that light pink wash, and now I'm coming in and I'm applying deeper concentrations of the pigment so that I get this really nice variation in color. And I'm having like little pockets of red and then little pockets of this brighter fuchsia. So you're going to just apply the color sort of in your personal taste. I do think applying it a little bit deeper is better than not quite so deep, because you want the things in the resist to really stand out, and the lighter the colors, the more difficult it is to see that resist. Keep in mind also the colors will lighten as they dry. So once you have it where you like it, you can go ahead and dry it. Next, I'm working with my Clearly Besotted stamp. I'm stamping onto watercolor paper, and in this part I am stamping with Distress ink in tea dye. I'm starting with the Distress ink because I plan to color outside the lines. Kind of funny, I know normally in art we try to stay in the lines, but in this case I really wanted sort of a whimsical feel to this, so I wanted to go outside the lines. Therefore, I'm stamping with the Distress ink so that later on I'm going to stamp with my black lines at the end of my project. That way my black lines are on top of my stamped image as opposed to underneath. As well, depending, some inks don't react as well to the amount of water you'll use with watercolors. It's not necessarily so much an issue with the archival ink, but still I prefer to do this by stamping over top with the black after I'm done. Alrighty, so I've changed my brush. The first brush I used was a wide round brush. Now I'm using a finer detail brush. The one I used is no longer available, but the Ranger fine tip brush is almost identical, so you can go ahead and use that. So to color the flowers, I started with a light pink on the top, then a red for the flower on the left, and a combination of the red and the pink or the fuchsia for the flower on the bottom right. Next, I'm going to apply the green ink for the stem and the flower, or the leaves, on this stamped image. So for this, I'm starting with a lighter green, and then you're going to see me go right up to the palette again and directly take green right from the palette onto the stamped image, and that is going to give me a darker concentration of the green. And because the watercolors are still wet, the green is going to sort of fan out, so it gives you that lovely effect that watercolor is sort of known for, where the colors bleed into each other. It's really beautiful. Now the one thing on this stamped image is there is one other blossom that I hadn't colored yet. It's a bud that's closed, and so I'm going to take the red and go over and color it. And what you'll notice is that the red then bled into the green because my watercolor is still really wet. There's a lot of water on the surface of this. So I'm using my paper towel to dab at it. It's up to you. After you dab and you remove, you could color again, or in my case, I actually liked what this looked like, so it was fine with me. I'm going to go ahead and heat set everything. So you can air dry it, or you can heat it with a heat tool, as I've done here. Now that my image is colored, I'm going to come back with this black ink, as I had mentioned before, and stamp. So I'm using the Archival ink pad by Ranger in Jet Black. Now, pretty much the only difficult thing about today's project is lining this stamp back up. As you can see, I am doing it by eye. If you happen to have one of the Misty stamping tools by Sweet Petunia, this is the perfect place for it. So you could have stamped originally your tea dye with that stamping tool and then come back and done the same thing with this black. It would have made things a lot easier, but I don't have the tool yet, so therefore I lined it up by eye. Okay, so I've been jumping forward on the video while I've been talking, and I'm starting to add a shadow to this flower. The shadow is just going to help your flower pop off the page and help it look more dimensional. I'm starting off with this same fine tip brush. I'm using a combination of the brown and the gray pigments from this Prima watercolor set. And to start, I'm painting fairly close to the stamped image. As you can see, I'm also really only adding color to one side of the stamped image because that's kind of how shadows work in general. They're not 360 degrees around a thing. I started with that fine detail brush. As you can see, I've now moved to my round brush, and I've done that because now I want to blend the edge of that shadow into the white cardstock background. Oh, and there I had a piece of fuzz that somehow got on my project. That's what I was doing with my hand. Anyway, as you can see, I'm using this round brush, and for the most part, it's mainly water. It's not too much pigment that I'm adding into it, and I'm rubbing out the edges. And there, I just applied a little more brown to the bottom of the flower for the ground. All right, so it's assembly time. We've got our little pieces together. I've taken that watercolor flower, the Clearly Besotted flower, and I've cut it out and I've mounted it onto some basil cardstock in peanut fudge. And then I've cut a piece of white cardstock the same size as my card front, so it's going to be 5.5 by 4.25. And now I'm gluing the elements together. The Wildflower sentiment gets glued to the top of the card front, and now I'm gluing some vintage ledger paper. And this really is just from an old ledger that I bought a long time ago at an antique store. Also, I wanted to mention that Wildflower, the Cosmo Cricket Wildflower greeting, I also cut that down a little bit. There was quite a bit of watercolor paper above and below the saying, and I needed a bit more room for my stamped image, so I've trimmed that down a little bit on the top and the bottom, not on the sides, just top and bottom. So I lined everything up, liked the way it looked, and now I'm showing you that I was going to add a zigzag stitch, which you can see right there, and that's why I mounted this on a card blank as well. I did that because I knew that I was going to sew, and I don't like the sewing showing on the inside of my card when you open it up. So I have also added some pop dots or dimensional adhesive to the back of the floral greeting, and now I'm lining it up and sticking it onto this card blank. I designed the card so that this brown cardstock did overlap the Wildflower. I sort of liked that. Now I'm going to glue everything to a fully functioning card. Once you've done that, your project is complete. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today's project, and please let me know if you have any questions. Bye.